in-person testimony, Mr. Fred Birnbaum, if you'll approach the podium. Introduce yourself, tell us who you represent, and you have the floor. I might just, before you start, indicate that we have distributed in your folders a packet that Mr. Birnbaum, I think, will explain to us. I don't think that was adequately identified. It says DFM data on it. The fact that it wasn't adequately identified was my fault, so I apologize for that. I'll be better about that in the future. Mr. Birnbaum, the floor is yours.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. I'm Fred Birnbaum with the Idaho Freedom Foundation. I'm here to speak in favor of House Bill 40, and this is my handout, and actually the error is mine. The reason I didn't put my name on it, normally you distribute that just when you speak, so it's obvious, but because it was lengthy, the secretary said, let's put it out early. So that's on me, it's not on you, Mr. Chairman. So I think it's very important for the committee to understand tax policy is dynamic. That's the key takeaway from my testimony. Meaning if you cut taxes by X million dollars, you won't necessarily see a corresponding reduction in revenue. And that's because with tax policy, good tax policy and bad tax policy, they're second order effects. So good tax policy puts money back in the hands of citizens, businesses, and they go do things that promote economic growth. There's another effect, and we're seeing that. The Tax Foundation's spoken about this in some of their research, and that is citizens are mobile. They can go from California to Idaho, as we all know, or from New York to Florida in response to changes in tax policy. So if people move to the state, and certainly the provision related to the veterans would encourage that, they're obviously going to bring their paychecks with them, their entrepreneurship with them, et cetera. So tax policy is dynamic. So the notion that if we are going to cut taxes, we might starve the government is just not so. But I'm making an assertion, and the reason I brought this handout was to back that up. So, good, Mr. Chairman, I'm going to go through this, and I'll try to be brief. So the first page, and I apologize to the audience, I maybe should have done a PowerPoint. That's how it goes. The first page is substantiation of the 4.6 million number that billion that you've heard about in tax cuts. And I'm not going to go through all of it, but it's a document for your reference. And this is provided by DFM data. I just didn't want people to think that I calculated this. I asked DFM and they provided it to me. They've provided to other people. It is important to note in the bottom, there's an ongoing box, and that says 929 million. So this is a combination of the tax cuts that were one time and ongoing. So some people might think, well, gosh, 4.6 billion, the general fund revenue is close to 6, that's not the numbers. These are an accumulation of dollars over time. The second page is a summary of state and local tax collections. And this, again, comes from your LSO website. There's a couple of key takeaways here. If you did the compound growth rate from 2015 to 2024, that's 6.7% a year. Now, of course, embedded in this is property tax, individual and corporate income tax, sales tax, other major taxes, motor fuel, corporate. It's virtually everything. It probably doesn't have driver's license fees and some small things. The point is that the revenue growth is actually exceeded population plus inflation with the tax cuts, meaning that the tax cuts have not starved the state or the locals of revenue. It's just a fact. If you look at the next page, it's kind of an eye chart. I think it's an important one. This is where the money comes from and where it goes. Again, it's state and local. I do think it's important for this committee to recognize the fact that we do not have discrete buckets. So you can see from the sources, individual corporate sales, miscellaneous property tax, they go all over the place. As the speaker mentioned, property taxes, there's that one arrow, just go to local funds. They do not come into the state to be appropriated. Yes, the tax commission has a role in calculating, administrating, but the flow of dollars is to local. But you can see everywhere else, the arrows go all over the place. And that's why you do need, this committee, I believe, needs to have a holistic view of tax policy. It's not just we're cutting taxes to the general fund, or again, we could spend a lot of time, but this is some background for you to consider. The final page, and then I'll wrap up, is the cash position. Now, this is provided by LSO. I'm not positive, but I believe to get this, they use the governor's request, and then they just run it through their model. So that's why you have this asterisk in the ending cash. So I believe, but I'm not positive, that the ending cash takes into account the $100 million that the governor proposed in this budget. You know, he had a placeholder. And then some other spending things that JFEC may not agree with. The summary point, though, is despite all that, the ending cash is $1.6 billion. So there is absolutely room for another $150 million of tax relief. It's just a fact. In fact, this ending balance is much higher than they've been historically. This projected 227.6 with the $100 million. So the notion that we're going to somehow starve the state of revenue is just unfounded. Thank you, and I'll stand for any questions.